To begin, loosen the bolts that hold up the POP sign display. There are 4 bolts total. After loosening, remove the bolts, spacers, washers, and nuts and keep them, as you'll use these again to reattach in a later step. Set this to the side with all the appropriate hardware together. Next, loosen the set screws on the back of the sign assembly. There should be 3 total. Make sure to loosen all 3, including the middle. After all set screws are loosened, lift gently upwards on the sign assembly as a whole. This will allow you to have access to the wiring. You may need to maneuver the wires so that you can have access to the plugs that connect the sign assembly to the bottom left cabinet. Be cautious when handling any of the low voltage wiring in your unit. Pulling on the wiring too vigorously or quickly could compromise the insulation on the wire itself, exposing the wire to the metal and causing your lights to malfunction. Next, disconnect the electrical connection from the sign assembly and set to the side. Now loosen the set screw on the left-hand cabinet upright. Lift upwards on the upright to remove. This may require 2 hands and some gentle persuasion. When free, lift up, pulling the electrical wire through the tube gently. This piece you may discard. Set the new left-hand riser up and make sure that the wire is long enough. If not, use the wire provided to make a new extension. Now feed the wire up through the tubing. Make sure that the wire feeds all the way through. Now you may set the riser in its place while gently pulling from the top to make sure not to pinch the wires in the fitting. If pipe seems a little bit snug, you may gently tap with a rubber mallet. Now using a level, tighten the set screw. Loosen set screw and remove piece of pipe on tall center cabinet. Now move to right-hand cabinet and loosen set screw for the top piece of pipe on that cabinet. This as well as the centerpiece may be discarded. Now loosen the set screw on the bottom of the right-hand cabinet. After loosened, lift gently on the cabinet to expose the electrical connections below. Disconnect these wires. Now loosen set screw on the bottom of the right-hand side. Gently lift pipe up, exposing electrical connection. Disconnect these wires. You may discard this piece of tubing. Check the wire from the old tube against the length of the new tube to see if it's long enough. If not, you may need to use wire provided to make a new length. If a new length is required, strip the ends about 1/2 inch to expose the bare wire. Double check the type of connection that's coming from the base in the wire that you're replacing. There are both female and male connections. You'll want to make sure to attach the appropriate one. Twist wires so they're nice and tight and will fit into your connection securely. Next, make sure to place your connection in the appropriate color-coded slot. Also, make sure that the metal is where it will be crimped properly. Insert the wire into the center of the connection and then squeeze, as this will make a tight, secure connection. Repeat this process for any and all other connections. Feed the wire up through the bottom so that it penetrates the top of the tubing. Check your connections against the base of the cabinet and make sure that the appropriate connections are used. Next, hold the tubing over the base fitting and make the electrical connections. After connections are secure, place the pipe down into the fitting while gently pulling upwards on the wire as to not pinch the wiring. Now, using a level, you may tighten the set screw. Next, hold the right-hand cabinet gently above the tubing and make the appropriate electrical connections. After connections are completed, tuck the wire in down through the tubing and gently lower the cabinet onto the tubing itself. Be careful not to pinch the wires. Now tighten the set screw in the bottom fitting of the cabinet. Before setting the top right-hand pipe in place, make sure the orientation is correct by comparing it to the left-hand side. The holes should line up from top to bottom. Now, place the right-hand tube in its fitting. After making sure it's level, you may now tighten the set screw. Now it's time to reattach the POP sign assembly using the hardware that was set aside earlier when we removed it in the first step in this video. A washer and the bolt penetrates through the back side of the tubing. The spacer sets between the tubing and the POP sign assembly. After all appropriate hardware is in place, lift the POP sign assembly and line the bolts up with the holes that are located in the back. When you have the 4 bolts lined up and they've penetrated through the back side of the POP sign assembly, use your free hand to place a nut on the bolt and lightly tighten. After hand tightening is complete, you may use a socket and adjustable wrench to start tightening the 4 bolts. Use a level to make sure that everything is plumb. After you're sure that level is set, you may go back and snug up anything that seems a bit loose. Next, place the center tube on the top fitting of the middle. Using the hardware provided, place the bolt, washer, and spacer through the tubing as shown. Hand tighten the nut in the back center of the POP display. Now tighten this bolt using your adjustable wrench and socket. Check for level on this piece as well. After it's leveled, go ahead and tighten the bottom set screw. Next, lift the sign assembly in place to allow for electrical connections. Make sure that each of the connections are seated properly and be careful not to pinch the wires. After connections are made and secure, gently pull the wire through the end cap of the sign assembly as shown. You may now lower the sign assembly equally on both sides at the same time, being careful not to pinch the wire at the top. Now that sign assembly is sitting atop the posts, you may secure by tightening the set screws on both sides. After tight, be sure to gently push the exposed wire back in through the end cap of the tubing. Be careful not to skin the wire. And this is what your unit should look like now. We hope this video has been informational, but if you have any further questions, feel free to email us at laura.dreamscapeart@gmail.com.